Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesdays at the Center, hosted by the John Hope Franklin Center and the Duke University Center for International and Global Studies. Today, we are pleased to welcome Eve Puffer, Wanda Boone, and Amber Rieder for a talk titled Coping Together, a family strengthening program fostering resilience and hope during the COVID-19 pandemic. Please remember to keep your microphone muted and to submit questions and comments in the chat. Now, I leave the floor to the DUSIC's director, Professor Giovanni Zanalda, who will introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini, and thank you to all our speakers and guests today, and thank you to the attendees for joining this very important webinar. And this is not only a timely discussion, but it's also important to us at the John Hope Franklin Center, the Duke Center for International Global Studies, because it represents really a model of the type of topics and events that we like to organize for the Wednesday at the Center series, which combines interest on research and scholarships with community service. And in this case, there is also an international component, although we are going to talk about North Carolina today, because the model or part of the model that has been used by the researchers and speakers today is based on some of the international work that has been done before. I will not take more time than needed because we want to hear from the speakers. I want just to mention a couple of things about their background, but you can have the full bio in the invitation. And so I'm just going to say welcome to Dr. Wanda Boone. She's the executive director of the nonprofit Together for Resilient Youth, TRI, the major partner for the Coping Together project, and is deeply engaged in Durham, North Carolina communities. Then Dr. Eve Puffer is a global mental health researcher and a licensed clinical psychologist. Her research focuses on developing and evaluating integrated community-based interventions to promote child mental health, improve family functioning, and prevent HIV risk behavior. Dr. Amber Rieder is a recent graduate of McMaster University's Interdisciplinary Neuroscience Graduate Program in Ontario, Canada. Amber is currently a global mental health postdoctoral associate at the Duke Global Health Institute and Duke Institute for Brain Sciences under the mentorships of Dr. Puffer, Franz, and Dr. Dawson. So thank you very much. The presenters are going to share slides. You can ask questions during the presentations to the chat room, and then at the end, there's going to be time for Q&A. The presenters are happy if you want to ask questions by through the chat, but also in person, you can unmute yourself and you can also share your video if you would like to do so. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to the presenters.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I've just shared slides, so let me know if you can't see them. But I am just so excited to be here to talk about the Coping Together program, as are all of us. My first job is to give you some background. So to tell you how we got to this point of partnering with Dr. Boone and starting the Coping Together program. And the story actually starts in Kenya. So I'm a psychologist focusing on child and family treatment. And since 2008, I have focused most of my global mental health research in Kenya. And that's been in Uhuru Bay and Eldoret, Kenya. Throughout that time, my focus has been with my Kenyan colleagues on family-based interventions that are specifically designed for low resource settings. And we do this because we know how powerful family influence can be on child mental health. So you see here in this social ecological model, the family as a powerful influence in the microsystem. So our basic theory of change is if we can provide family-based interventions, we can improve family functioning and impact the mental health of both children and caregivers. We can use this approach as a prevention approach to prevent mental health problems or as a treatment approach. So the intervention program that we've emphasized in our work in Kenya is called Tuko Pamoja, and that means we are together in Kiswahili. This is a 2-tiered family intervention. So tier 1 is the group family strengthening, and this is a prevention and promotion program. Tier 2 is family counseling, which is individualized counseling for families already experiencing distress. In both of these, we really want to help families become stronger and heal relationships to reach their goals and to prevent or improve mental health problems. So this group family strengthening program, I want to show you what it looks like in Kenya very briefly so that we can talk about what we've adapted for here in North Carolina. So here you can see this family strengthening program happening in a religious congregation in Kenya. It was delivered by lay facilitators, community members in Mahuru Bay, where this was first tested. Family members attend all together and they practice community skills together. The children who participated actively were between the ages of about 7 and 16, and the primary focus is on communication. So this was a 9-session program with family communication applied to economic communication, emotional support, and then the context-specific stressor of HIV. We conducted a randomized controlled trial, and we saw improvements in our primary outcome of family communication across all of these different domains. But what we did note is that this program is a program best for prevention and promotion and not adequate for those families who are experiencing severe distress already in the moment. And that led to our development of the family counseling model that provides home-based family counseling for individual families. It combines family therapies and mental health therapies that are evidence-based, but adapted for the context. And it's modular so that families receive the modules that they need to work on the relationships in which they are experiencing problems. I have the tree here because the tree is our central metaphor for both tiers 1 and 2. Different parts of the tree symbolize different parts of the family system. And we use that to talk about becoming resilient trees that can withstand storms. This was also lay provider delivered. And when we piloted this program, we saw pre-post improvements showing positive signals at these multiple levels that we were attempting to improve. Overall family functioning, couples, parents and children, harsh parenting strategies, and then mental health. So with these positive indicators, in Kenya, we started to prepare for a larger intervention trial to combine these 2 tiers. But that was in 2020, and the COVID pandemic hit. So here we had travel restrictions, but we also had aspects of our program that were delivered in religious congregations, group settings that were no longer safe to work in. But even more than that, we started to notice the widespread impacts that COVID was having, both on families in Kenya, but also right here at home. So we know that COVID-19 has these very tangible impacts on families, and each of these has associated psychological consequences. So with this comes the increased need for mental health treatment. The problem is mental health treatment access decreased during COVID-19, but the disparities and the lack of access to mental health care was certainly not new. If we look at mental health treatment in the US, of the 11 million people who needed mental health services in 1 year, 5.5 million, 47% of them did not receive access to any care. Closer to home, in North Carolina in 2021, 56% of adults did not have their mental health care needs met. 72% of children with a mental health disorder did not receive treatment. and North Carolina ranks 44th and 45th in access to mental health care. Right here in Durham, North Carolina, in the Durham County Community Health Assessment, mental health was one of the top 5 concerns. About a third of students reported depression in the past year, and we have large numbers needing mental health treatment and substance use treatment that they are not receiving. We see this mental health treatment gap, but at the same time, it's essential for us to realize that many families were dealing with long-standing adversities much before COVID-19 came on the scene. And just some of these include the legacy of social injustice and systemic racism, long-term health disparities and inequitable access to health care, job loss and economic hardship, and all of these exacerbated by the context of the pandemic. So when we saw this combination, it led our team to think about how families were really doing, and especially in the South, which is often underrepresented in national research. So we conducted an online survey of families across 18 Southern states. And this was just over 1,000 parents reporting on just over 2,000 children. We tried to ask questions to understand different aspects of the entire family system. So overall family functioning, mental health, and then the dyadic relationships within the family. I'll show you just a few of our results. 72% reported their child's mental health has deteriorated. They reported a range of domains of concerns, and you'll see that the top here was emotional concerns for their child's mental health. 32% of parents themselves reported moderate to severe anxiety since the pandemic started. And a third of them reported not having anyone to turn to. For couples, those who were in partnerships reported 46% reported feeling distant or withdrawn from their spouse. And then when we asked for what services people wanted, they reported a variety as we would expect. But among the highest endorsed were needing services for their behaviors, the behavior and stress of their child, and their own mood and stress. One caregiver wrote, "It's hard, especially on the kids. They feel stress and it's impacting their grades." Another parent wrote, "I have been home with my 2 children for nearly 250 days. My youngest hasn't had the first year of life that I imagined, and my oldest is missing out on friends and school too." So we were analyzing these survey results at the same time as the Duke Global Health Institute provided an opportunity for pilot studies focused on reciprocal innovation during COVID. By reciprocal innovation, we mean bilateral learning from strategies we've been using in global health in low and middle income countries, and how those might be applied in the United States, and especially during a crisis like COVID-19. So for our team, that meant being able to ask, could tuko pamoja from Kenya also be helpful for families here in Durham, North Carolina? And that is what led to our funding and beginning of this Coping Together project. This initial funding was awarded to me, Dr. Regine Preschel-Bell, and Dr. Amber Rieder through DGHI. And our very first steps were to first hear from community organizations through holding focus groups. And those really confirmed that the Tuko Pamoja core content was a good fit for family needs if contextualized and adapted, and that increased material on coping would also be beneficial to add. We immediately explored options for potential community partners, and that led us to Dr. Boone and her organization Together for Resilient Youth. And we'll talk much more about that in a moment. We also had the opportunity through Duke Bass Connections to recruit trainees and students at all levels. So we created this multidisciplinary partnership that led to this large team that we were able to work together towards this goal of adapting Tukopamoja for North Carolina into a new intervention, coping together. So this is the point where I get to pass it over to Dr. Boone to talk about the partnership that we formed. I'll jump back in to talk briefly about what this program looks like, and then we will pass it over to Dr. Rieder to talk about our pilot results. So Dr. Boone, I'm delighted for you to talk a bit about our partnership.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and very excited about our partnership. It has meant so much. So Together for Resilient Youth is our organization. And there's a lot going on in this slide, but our mission is to use the public health model to address the underlying issues that result in behavioral health challenges such as substance use, chronic disease, violence among youth, by surrounding them with resilient adults living in resilient communities. And Together for Resilient Youth has reach across North Carolina, across the United States, and soon in Kenya. But we have that connection, don't we? Together for Resilient Youth is a coalition of coalitions, meaning that all the little circles that you see around the purple circle are organizations, individuals that help to work with us in order to have collective impact in some of these large areas that we want to have influence in. So you'll see LIFT for young people ages 9 to 17, College Try 18 to 24. We have Good Neighbor Business Network, Faith Communities, Law Enforcement, community members at large, health, parents, faith, and school. And also, sadly, we have parents that have lost children due to overdose. So the role of adverse childhood experiences. Together for Resilient Youth actually started with my husband and I taking care of 3 children that were traumatized, and we were really too young to do this. It was in 1974. We actually started our work with therapeutic foster children in 1995. For 15 years while we had our own children, and then really focusing in on what is really going on with people who have such great needs, not only in Durham, North Carolina, but just in general. And so we started looking at adverse childhood experiences in 2014. But then it's not only adverse childhood experiences, it's other adverse conditions, as you see represented here. So they're adverse climate experiences, and note that COVID-19 is identified as one of those. But we understand that floods and earthquakes and tornadoes impact low-wealth communities more so than others because of where houses are built and that kind of thing. And then under adverse childhood experiences, we have experiences that have to do with things that happen to a child before their 18th birthday in the realm of physical abuse, emotional neglect, and then also other situations in the home, such as mother treated violently, divorce, substance use, incarcerated relative, and those kinds of things. And if someone has 4 or more of them, then the results can be devastating in terms of chronic disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, heart disease, STDs. All the things that we want to prevent can somehow be founded in adverse childhood experiences. Then there are adverse community experiences, low wealth communities, neighborhoods that don't have the resources in order to be healthy. And then, of course, there are adverse cultural experiences that have to do with racism, discrimination, lack of social mobility, poor housing, and that kind of thing. So this paints a picture of what many people experience beyond what we see in the home. And so TRI has created a prevention program to help to make sure that we are able to address those things. And we can go to the next slide, unless we have something in the chat, not sure. And so in terms of the Durham community, in the darker brown are the areas where we see the most risk, districts 1 and 4 in Durham. These are also communities that were redlined and have all kinds of challenges. In the graphic to the right, we see the life expectancy of individuals who live in these darker brown areas, and the life expectancy is lower than you see in Durham as a whole, which is 79 years of age. And you can see how much lower these life expectancies are in those low wealth communities. And so what do we do? Our community health workers, which we can just stay right here on this slide for a minute, all have been trained in the social determinants of health that are depicted on the previous slide in terms of the different challenges that are affected. And those have to do with, and we have prevention programs or initiatives in each of those: economic stability, education, health and healthcare, built environment or neighborhood, and social and community context. And these are our wonderful coping together facilitators. Each of them have their own expertise and impact in the community. And community health workers are individuals who are already in the fabric of communities that they influence and serve. And so they are the heroes behind Coping Together. And also, I believe that Coping Together is a resiliency-informed intervention. So the prevention strategies that TRI has, actually, I coined the phrase transformative prevention. And so we'll just skip over to the far right. And what this means is that we believe that people are resilient. People need our compassion as they learn new skills. We need to learn how skills of well-being can reduce suffering. And the question, rather than what is wrong with you or even what happened to you, is what is right with you and what are your strengths? And lastly, a very quick story about Ubuntu, because this really is, I find this at the root of our everything, who we are as Together for Resilient Youth. The story goes that there was an archaeologist in a certain village in Africa, and he, upon leaving, decided to leave a basket of fruit down near a tree way over there with some children nearby him. And he said, all of your children, if you run to the tree, one of you can get that basket. And so he said, 1, 2, 3, go. And the children joined hands together and ran towards the basket, sat down and enjoyed the basket of fruit together. And so he said, why in the world would one of you not run by yourself? Why did you join hands and go together? The answer was, how can one of us be happy when the rest of us are sad? And therefore, resilient people, resilient community, resilience for all. Thank you. So in working together at first, I was excited because I heard Kenya first. And I didn't know why. I didn't have a lot of information about what was going on. But really thinking that something that existed in a positive way, led by people who were in the community, who laid down blankets on steps and sat down with people and talked to them about what their concerns were. And to me, that's what community health work is all about, that individuals, helping individuals that are known and that are authentic to their community seemed to be what was important. And so that was my motivation. So there are two journeys, and this was really exciting to me. So as we just delved more into who Eve is and who Wanda is, we found out that we had roots in Hartsville, South Carolina. The roots that I have are my family, my mother's family, brothers and sisters, 11 of them, siblings, grandmother, grandfather, who are all deceased now, but who had such an impact in my life, even during the time of segregation, which is when we visited them in Hartsville. And when Eve said, well, I'm from a little place that I don't think anybody knows about, it's Hartsville, South Carolina, the gasp that came to me was amazing. So thinking about the history of segregation, thinking about Eve being from Hartsville, South Carolina, her family, and thinking about how healing could come to both of us in terms of our experience. But Eve is a very special person. And her experience was not what I expected. The openness, the understanding, the desire to listen were all reasons why I said, this is the place that Tri needs to be. And so we committed to being partners, real partners, listening partners, hearing partners, story sharing partners, creating a relationship that has built success in coping together. And so the goals, as you see here, are to adopt the model from Kenya to coping together in North Carolina, to plan the pilot study, to implement our awesome community health workers, to look at the results and get ready because you will be excited about those, and then plan for the future, work towards a long-term partnership all over the world. So the foundation of the partnership, community-based participatory research, sounds like a lot of words that you wouldn't think that the community would understand, but the community does. And I think that that is the first thing that I would like to communicate to you, is that community members are able to understand and participate together as equals in this process. And so from us, asking meaningful questions, making sure that the design of the programs are useful and understood in the community, and to demonstrate effectiveness to stakeholders. And what we expect from academic partners are to design the programs that are culturally and linguistically appropriate, and then improve validity of the outcome measures. And we've done that together. So what makes our partnership work? Trust, real shared decision-making, transparency, openness to correction and change, and long-term commitment. Part 2.
Here I am again, Dr. Boone. Thank you so much for that. It's really nice to reflect on our journey at this point, with our project just coming to an end and thinking about the next steps. So through this partnership, we did adapt Tuko Pamoja into an 8-session manualized program, Coping Together, that we piloted together in North Carolina. Involved in that was a series of development workshops, training of the community health workers that really wasn't your normal training. It was a chance for community health workers to learn about the program, but then give feedback in real time throughout the entire pilot study and now afterwards, so that the next version of Coping Together is even better.
And Eve, I'm sorry, could I just stop you for a minute? Because I understand that Latoya and Nancy are in the audience, and if they just want to wave and say hello, or have something to say. I'm sorry that I didn't stop earlier. So
I'm so thrilled about that.
Nancy or Latoria, would you like to say something? Okay, we can go on.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much to both of you for being here. And during Q&A, it's wonderful to know you're here because it would be great for people to hear your experience as well. So Latoria, Nancy, and our three other facilitators engaged completely actively in all of these activities. One was adapting the content and session structure. A huge change was, of course, preparing for virtual delivery over Zoom. So we did a lot of creation of multimedia content with major leadership from our graduate student and undergraduate student teams. And we did, of course, cultural and linguistic contextualization, making new videos, new examples, all contextualized to the North Carolina context. And I want to tell you more about the program by showing you a video that the participants saw on their first session that they had.
Welcome to the first session of the Coping Together program. I'm so excited to have you here.
Families, we are ecstatic to see you at our first session.
We're so happy to see you. Come on in.
Welcome.
We are so happy to see you.
Hi, and welcome to Coping Together. Before we get started, we wanted to remind you what Coping Together is all about and what it will be like over the course of the coming weeks. Some of you may have seen this video before, but let's review for those who haven't. Coping Together is a virtual program for the entire family. The purpose of Coping Together is to strengthen families, and we do this by helping families improve communication, better cope with stress, more effectively problem solve together, and to set a family vision for the future. In Coping Together, you and your family will meet with a group of 3 to 4 other families online for about an hour each week. Each group of families will have their very own trained facilitator who will lead all 8 weekly sessions and walk you through the program step by step. Coping Together sessions involve active group participation, but don't worry, it's actually pretty fun. Each week, you'll learn practical new skills, do fun activities and games with your family, watch videos, and participate in group discussions with the other families in your group. Sessions are especially great for families with kids between the ages of 10 and 17, but everyone's welcome to join. Oh, and did I mention Coping Together is totally free? Coping Together was created through a collaboration between psychologists at Duke University, local Durham-based community organizations, as well as parents and teens like you.
So that is how we open the program with the participants in our program. And you saw there the other facilitators greeting the families. So this was 8 sessions online. The first half of the program is really foundational skills building, very strengths focused, and talking again about that central metaphor of the tree becoming stronger and more resilient. The second half of the program continues that skill building and focus on strengths, while helping families to apply some of those skills also to the tougher moments in life, thinking about problem solving, coping, conflict resolution, and then finally graduation and solution-focused action planning for the future. So this is our adaptation of that tree. We talk about how the tree symbolizes those different relationships, and we want to move from a struggling tree to a thriving one. We talk about the importance of strong roots, which include family values, culture, ancestry, faith, and beliefs. And we ultimately talk about how storms in life are inevitable, but that by strengthening our families and our family system and the skills that we have, that we will be able to weather those storms together. I show you this theory of change to show that every piece of this intervention is expected to have specific mechanisms of change, different skills that are built that all lead to what outcomes that we hope to see in the intermediate term and long term among those who participate in the program. And this was what guided our pilot study and what will continue to guide the research on this program as we continue. So Amber, I will pass this over to you to talk about the pilot study that we did just complete and some of our results. And if you would like, Dr. Rieder, I can stop sharing so that you can do the same.
Okay, we're seeing the right thing. Looking good?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Puffer and Dr. Boone. It's a genuine privilege to be able to present with you both today. And I'm just so grateful for your mentorship and wisdom. And it's an honor to be able to tell you and the audience about the next part of the Coping Together story. And this is the story where families in Durham get to engage with Coping Together and Coping Together facilitators for the first time. So if you've made it this far into the presentation, you've already been through our journey from Kenya to the Southern USA. You've learned about part 1 and how we established our community partnership, and in part 2 about how the Coping Together program was adapted. And the next part of the story is really fresh in our minds because we have just completed the very first inaugural Coping Together pilot study. So Coping Together facilitators delivered the program to 6 Coping Together virtual family groups. And what this means is that each facilitator met with a Coping Together virtual group on Zoom every week, and facilitators met with an average of 3 or 4 families per group with a range of 1 to 6 families. And from those family groups, the Coping Together facilitators served 48 individual family members, or 16 family units in total, from across the Durham and surrounding region in our pilot study. Caregivers who participated in Coping Together with their families were majority Black, female, and with a median age of 44. And for youth, they were just over half were male, and the youth ranged from age 7 to 18, with a median of age 12. But notably, Coping Together facilitators served a number of unique family structures, including single parent families, families where grandparents were raising children, and also foster care families. The Coping Together facilitators were recruited families from within their own community health networks. And although we intended to start all of the groups at the same time, logistically enrolling all of the families virtually during a pandemic was one of our early implementation barriers. But the first Coping Together group did start on June 7th of this year. And the rest of the groups with each facilitator followed in the coming weeks. And the final Coping Together group for the pilot study was completed only 2 weeks ago. Logistically, it turned out to be pretty great that the groups did not run concurrently as we planned, because it gave us time to do the adaptation between each facilitator and each session during the facilitator practices, and also feedback that we received after facilitators delivered the program with families in the community. We implemented a pre-post test study design utilizing a rich mixed methods data collection approach, some of which I'll describe as I show you the outcomes. In order to reduce the burden of taking so many surveys on participants, and based on the feedback from Dr. Boone and the facilitators, we tried to be creative in our data collection approach to go beyond the typical self-report surveys, which have their limitations in certain contexts and populations. And I'd like to show you some of those, some of these data now. And because this was a pilot study and not yet a randomized control trial, we're really looking for signals of change in the right direction, the positive direction. This is also a community sample, so our baseline reporting of mental health concerns, for example, was relatively low to begin with. So I'll start a bit with our implementation data. Overall, families regarded the program highly, rating agree or strongly agree for their overall satisfaction of the program, the satisfaction of their interactions with the facilitator, and the convenience of having the sessions online during the pandemic was relevant. We also asked about the relevance of the program content and whether families felt that the program was beneficial and whether they thought they had learned from the program, whether they would continue to benefit from what they had learned, and also whether families would recommend the program to other families. And overall, families reported that they agreed or strongly agreed on those implementation measures. We also asked youth to assess the benefit of the program by writing a letter to their before coping together selves. This is an idea by one of our graduate students, Savannah Johnson. And this was an opportunity for youth to reflect on changes that they had experienced over the course of the program. So youth were asked to think back to who they were before they started the program and write a letter in a way that explains to their past selves what they would learn along the way. And the letters that they wrote were reassuring to their past selves, and I'd like to read two of those to you today. The first one is from a 6th grade male in Coping Together. Dear before coping together self, you will learn clear skills. These are the communication skills that they learn within the program, and how to express yourself. You'll learn how to listen to others, and you will grow closer to your family. And here's another letter from a 9th grade female in Coping Together. Dear old me, you're about to learn how to not ignore your problems. Yes, high school is tough, but you don't need to care or worry about others' opinions. You become confident and you face your problems head on. This helps with growing to do the things that you thought you wouldn't be able to do. This gives you more confidence to do those things. I grew because of Coping Together. One of the other ways that we measure the benefit of a program is to evaluate the closeness or togetherness in relationships, either between individuals, like a couple's relationship, or between a parent and child, for example, or even between oneself and one's community. We did this using the iOS, or inclusion of self and other skills, and we showed a picture like this on the Zoom screen to participants and asked them to rate the closeness with their family members before and after coping together. So you can see the instructions were to pick the pair of circles that best describes your relationship with, say, your overall family before coping together. For both caregivers and youth, overall family closeness increased. Caregivers went up on an average of 2.6 on that 7-circle rating scale, and youth went up an average of 1.75 pre and post intervention. And in their own words from our focus groups and interviews, here are two relevant quotes to overall family well-being from 2 caregivers. I felt at the beginning that we were not deeply rooted. Our tree has not grown, our roots are not deeper, and we have more roots. Our roots are deeper, sorry, and we have more roots. And the leaves have gotten stronger. And from another caregiver, we talk about being kinder to each other, and the boys have really been working on it. I think the whole house is a little quieter, gentler, or something. Similarly, we asked both caregivers and youth to rate the closeness of their relationship. That is the closeness between the caregiver and youth themselves. And across the board, we noted the increase on the iOS from both caregiver and youth reporters. And here's another creative way we sought to understand overall family change. Here you can see 2 pictures drawn by one youth in the program who participated in a qualitative family mapping activity. Youth were invited to draw the members of their family on a piece of paper that was labeled before. And they were to draw their family before the program, and the distance between the family members might represent something about their relationship or their relationship quality. So youth were encouraged to add symbols or words to represent what that space meant between them. And then they were asked to turn over the page and draw their family again, but this time draw their after coping together family. And similarly, show the changes that they have experienced and represent it in their drawing with words and symbols. And you can see that one youth drew her and her grandmother, who is her primary caregiver, both before and after coping together. And this is how she described her drawing. We started off on not good communication terms. This drawing shows that we grew closer because we did talk more. Coping together helped. We had to go downstairs and sit at the computer and talk to each other. We also noted small positive changes in the right direction in terms of caregiver-adolescent communication. And that was both from the caregiver and youth perspectives using the parent-adolescent communication scale. And the theme of communication was also reflected in our qualitative work. And here are two quotes from youth in the program. I just wasn't feeling myself, but when I had to go to coping together and we had to start communicating, I was starting to tell my caregiver more about what was going on in my head. And another quote, most of the time, whenever I would talk to my caregiver, it would be like about school or what I need or just stuff that I need to do better. And now it's more of like accomplishments and just more positive conversation. This held true for the relationship between couples and or partners, and also between siblings. Sibling relationship closeness moved from a mean of 1.3 to 5 on the iOS scale. Additionally, there was an increase in hope. Youth were feeling more hopeful after the intervention, both hope for themselves as an individual and hope for their family. And an example of an item that we might have asked in a question on the state hope scale is, I can think of many ways for me to reach my current goals, or for the family version, for my family to reach current goals. There were some survey results and that we did not observe changes for. Overall, for baseline, there was really low endorsement of negative things and high endorsement of positive things, which points to the need for more sensitive measures, including some of the qualitative work that we did to supplement. And there were low baseline mental health symptoms, so very small changes were being reported. And caregiver changes in hope were inconsistent and actually pretty high at baseline. So something for us to explore going forward. I'd like to wrap up just by sharing this quote about the program from one caregiver. Because some families are not close, they don't communicate, and they don't get along. So that would be the tree that's just about to fall down in the wind. That was sort of like our family, but now our tree is full of leaves. It's beautiful, it has green leaves, and it has a strong trunk, a strong base, and it's rooted in the ground. In conclusion, we learned that Tuka Pamoja from Kenya was adaptable to the US context, and that using a task shifting model where community health workers could deliver the intervention was feasible and acceptable. The preliminary quantitative and qualitative data indicate promising changes for family closeness, communication, and hope. And we had a low endorsement and only a small change on the individual mental health measures. I'd like to thank our incredible team who worked tirelessly this year to make this project happen and are continuing to work behind the scenes to analyze data and to prepare for the next round of Coping Together. So thank you to the undergraduates, the graduate students, the faculty who are here, and all of the community health workers who've joined in for the talk today. I'm going to end it here, and I've placed our contact information in case you'd like to reach any of us, but I think now would be a good time to open it up for questions from the audience. So Dr. Boone and Dr. Puffer and I are here and would love to answer your questions.
I think I saw that Nancy Rosales unmuted herself.
I did. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Boone.
Good afternoon.
I do want to give a big thank you to Dr. Boone and Dr. Eve for allowing us to participate and be a part of Coping Together. It has been 8 amazing weeks with families and children that I did not know, but we engaged, and the same way the program gave so many coping skills, I personally learned from kids as well and the families. It was an amazing experience, and I enjoy every step of the way. I most definitely do recommend Coping Together because it has some great coping skills that I even utilize myself. And so many of us need it, especially after COVID, to cope with our new lives and the way things work today. I look forward to hearing more of Coping Together. And as always, Dr. Boone, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Rosales. You had a challenging family situation as well for the families that you were serving. And so we learned a lot from your skill in delivering that. So we appreciate that. And thank you so much for being here today. And Latoria, at any point, if you want to unmute, we'd love to hear from you, but no worries if not.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Boone. Good afternoon, Eve. Good afternoon, Amber. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say that this program, Coping Together, again, just like Nancy expressed, it also helped with not just the families that I actually cope. It also helped with my family, how to communicate with my family. I feel that this Coping Together, again, with the pandemic and kids and job loss and all types of things that are happening now in our new world. I just feel that right now it's needed. It's very, very needed in our community because our kids are feeling alone. Just like I have a 7-year-old, this is her first year in school. So she's very don't know her communication skills, and just being around people is kind of, she's getting there, but this is her first year due to COVID. So having to talk to her and tell her about keeping on her mask and, Mommy, we still can take it off. And, it's hard, they want, kids, you just want to be kids. So just explaining to her that we still have to protect ourselves. So I have to communicate with her and let her know that, hey, we're going to get through this together. So with this program, it's really helpful for the communities. And I really feel like this Coping Together has impacted the families that I have coached in this last 8 sessions. I really have built a bond with them, to the point where they calling me, hey, he has a football game, you want to come? Sure, let me know the time and date. So my thing is I want to stay connected with them because I want to make sure they're using their clear skills, communication skills, and just being there supportive. Some people don't have that support, extra support. So I want to thank you all for letting me be a part of the program, and I will love to continue to work with our families and work with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, LaToya. It's clear you became part of their families.
Yes.
I learned a lot from watching you do that. And from watching you with your 7-year-old, I learned a lot from that as well. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
If there are other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but also if people have thoughts or suggestions, just unmute yourselves and share.
Hi, my name is Pari, and I'm in Dr. Puffer's Global Mental Health class, and it was so incredible to be able to hear from you guys and really see the impact of this project. I was really curious if you could talk. I had a few questions, you don't have to answer all of them, but one of my first questions was I was really curious about the letter model where you could actually see like the letter that kids wrote and kind of the changes they saw in themselves. And what inspired that? Like, were there previous studies that you implemented that from? And also, did the caregivers also write a letter? And then my other question was, in that letter, I noticed that obviously the ages were really different, like 10 to 17. So a 17-year-old mentioned like different factors that they learned, like navigating social relationships. So how were you able to accommodate like that range of ages when you were creating a program? Because I'm guessing that like a 10-year-old would have maybe different needs from a 17-year-old and what they're communicating with their like parents. So I was just curious about how you were able to kind of make sure that it was impactful for all ages that were involved.
Thanks, Pari. I'm actually going to call on Savannah Johnson, who Dr. Rieder mentioned, who developed that or came up with that idea.
Yes, it's such a great question, Pari. And that activity was born out of thinking about some creative ways to have the youth, and you saw the age range and you commented on that, but having youth reflect on how they think they may or may not have changed through the program. So it's not something that I know that Eve's used in other interventions, but it is something. I'm a clinical psych PhD student. So it's an activity that we've used with adolescents to think about changes that they may have observed over individual treatment. And so when we were thinking about different ways to measure the impact of coping together, this group model, this family model, but to think about the individual experience and giving youth a way that might feel more accessible to put words to that experience. So we weren't sure how it was going to go, but we did get some helpful and reflective responses using that format.
And this came right out of some suggestions from the facilitators and from Dr. Boone after we tried to administer surveys, kind of getting at those constructs, but it was hard for youth to complete them for various reasons. So we adapted and we looked for creative ways to ask these questions that were more ecologically valid or more embedded within what would feel, okay for the youth. So that was an important part of our adaptation and listening.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. So in thinking about changes in mental health, wellness, and wholeness, is it the way that questions might have been designed that did not reveal changes in mental health? I'm sure there were, but what would you say about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one question was yes. Well, the answer is yes, that some of the questions we used, we only asked 3 questions in the end about mental health symptoms, but those symptom-oriented questions are designed to identify clinically significant anxiety and depression symptoms. And so we weren't surprised because we were happy to see low endorsement of that, but this was a non-clinical sample. So no one in the family was recruited for having any clinically diagnosable mental health problems. If we do this again, and Dr. Boone, we talk about doing it again a lot, if it's even higher risk or a clinical sample in terms of mental health disorders, we would want to ask more of those questions because they'd be appropriate for the population. The hope measures and the family resilience measures that we are still analyzing are more appropriate because they sort of are more capture more normative experiences at baseline. So we need better measures to measure resilience and wellness. And we also need to do what you've been challenging us to do the whole time, is figure out how to build trust early enough on so that we can get some baseline measures, but without asking people to just put all of the negative things happening in their lives into their phone in an online survey before they've met any of us. So how do you get a baseline, but make people feel safe enough to report? So I think that's actually our next big conversation, Dr. Boone.
Thank you.
Oh, I see something, someone sent a suggestion to me in the chat related to the letter, as well as to have their youth write their future self and then look at that letter in the many months later, which is a really cool suggestion. And I know it's past 1 now, and so we will be happy to take questions if you want to email us or contact us in any way. These slides will be available, the recording will be available, and so you can see that there. And I am also glad to stay in this room for anybody who wants to stay and touch base or ask questions. But does anyone else from the John Hope Franklin Center have anything to add? I can be quiet.
We just wanted to say thank you, Eve, Wanda, and Amber. And thank you to all the attendees who joined us today. We will be sharing an article and video link and all the relevant resources with all the people who registered for today's event. And next week, we hope you can join us for another Wednesdays at the Center event. We will have the Duke historian, Calvin Chung Miao, who will present Third Worldism and the activist origins of Asian American studies. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next Wednesday. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.